The woman in the second row had stopped breathing. Not literally, but close enough. Her champagne flute was tilted at an angle that should have spilled, but her hand had gone completely still. 400 people filled the Gardner Ballroom at the Fairmont Royal York that evening, dressed in gowns and tailored suits, the kind of crowd that appeared in business magazines and charity brochures. A string quartet had been playing near the entrance. The MC was mid-sentence, reading from the teleprompter about tonight's guest of honor, the anonymous donor who had committed $42 million to build affordable housing for newcomer families across the Greater Toronto area. And the woman in the second row was staring at the stage, at the man in the charcoal gray suit, at the man who, 11 days ago, had been sitting on an upturned crate outside her stall at a community market on Gerrard Street East on a Tuesday afternoon in January. His jacket was too thin for that kind of cold. No gloves. One of his boots was letting in water. She had noticed the water in the boot because she notices everything. It is a habit she developed back home in Benin City, where her mother used to say that a woman who does not pay attention will be surprised by life at every turn. She had given him her last bowl of pepper soup, the one she had been keeping in the pot since noon, the one she had planned to eat on the TTC ride home, because she hadn't had time for lunch, and her feet were aching, and she had a 7-year-old to feed before she could think about herself. She had given it to a stranger because he looked cold and hungry and lost. Now that stranger was being introduced as Tariq Annan, founder and CEO of Annan Global Ventures, 40 years old, a man whose name appeared on the Forbes Canada list 4 times running, a man whose company had offices in Vancouver, London, and Accra. The champagne tilted a little further. Now, before we go any further, if you have ever wondered whether kindness still pays in this world, if you have ever given something without expecting anything back, and wondered whether it mattered, stay right here. And if you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because Ancient African Folktales is exactly where stories like this one live. The kind of stories that remind you why your grandmother told you always to be good to strangers. Now let us go back to the beginning. Tariq Annan had a problem that no accountant could fix and no lawyer could solve. He was 40 years old, worth $4.8 billion, and he did not trust a single person in his life. That is not a metaphor. That is a fact he had assembled over 20 years of careful, painful evidence. His company had grown from a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough, where he and a university friend had coded their first logistics platform on a second-hand laptop, into one of the most recognized tech and real estate conglomerates in the country. His face had appeared on the cover of Report on Business. The Globe and Mail had profiled him twice. He had been named one of Canada's leading philanthropists before most people in his own industry knew his name. He ate every dinner alone. His first serious relationship had ended when he was 26. His then-girlfriend had dragged her suitcase out of their shared apartment while his startup was struggling and said, "This is not the life I signed up for, Tariq. Call me when you make something of yourself." He had made something of himself. She had called, he had not answered. His second relationship lasted 4 years. She was sharp and beautiful and knew exactly how to position herself next to him at events so that photographers noticed both of them. She had a lifestyle blog, 100,000 followers, and a new boyfriend within 3 weeks of their breakup. A boyfriend, Tariq later discovered, who had been present for the last 8 months of their relationship. His business partners had not been kinder. One had forged documents to seize a subsidiary. Another had leaked contract details to a competitor in Vancouver. His childhood friend, a man he had known since primary school in Kumasi, had moved into Tariq's Rosedale home under the pretense of looking for work, spent 14 months there rent-free, and then filed a civil suit claiming partial ownership of the company. He had not written a single line of code, not one meeting, not one late night. By 40, Tariq had built a wall around himself so high and so thick that even the people who genuinely meant him well could not reach him. His executive assistant, a quiet and steady man named Otto, who had been with him for 9 years, and who left a coffee on his desk without being asked, was probably the closest thing Tariq had to a real friend. Once a month, Otto would say something like, "Boss, you should go outside." Like outside, not to a board meeting. Tariq always waved him off. Until his mother called. It was a Wednesday night in late November. Tariq was at his desk on the 34th floor, looking out at the lights of the city below, a city he had spent 18 years building a life in without ever quite feeling he belonged inside it, when his phone rang with a Kumasi number. Mama. My son. His mother's voice carried the particular quality of a woman who has lived long enough to say exactly what she means. How are you? I am fine. Business is good. I did not ask about business. Silence. When last, she said slowly, did someone do something kind for you when they did not know who you were? The question sat in his chest like a stone dropped in still water. Not once, not in years. Every kindness that came his way arrived with a price attached. Every warm smile concealed a calculation. He had forgotten what it felt like to be treated as simply a person, not a name, not a portfolio, not an opportunity. Mama, find out, my son. Go into the world with nothing and find out who treats you with dignity anyway. That person, that is the truth. The rest is just noise. She hung up. Tariq sat very still for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Otto. I need you to run the company for 30 days, he said. Is everything all right? I am going to disappear into the city. No phone, no cards, no name. I want to see what Toronto looks like when no one knows who I am. The silence on the other end was the kind that meant Otto was choosing his words with great care. Your mother told you to do this. She told me to find out who is kind to me when I have nothing. And you think the best way to do that is to become nobody, yes. Otto exhaled through his nose. Sundays. You check in every Sunday. If you miss one, I am calling the police and telling them everything. Agreed. The transformation took an afternoon. Tariq went to Value Village on Bloor Street and bought what he needed. A heavy parka with a broken zipper that let the wind through at the chest, canvas work pants, boots that had been resoled at least twice. He stopped shaving. He put $20 in his jacket pocket and left his phone, his wallet, and his watch in the apartment. He took the elevator to the lobby and walked out into the January air. Nobody looked at him. This, he discovered, was the city's particular talent. Toronto could make certain people invisible without a single act of deliberate cruelty, just indifference, distributed evenly across every face he passed, heads down, earbuds in. He walked through the financial district, through Kensington, along Queen West, and no one met his eyes. He had become a ghost, and the experiment had begun. On his fourth day, he met Portia. She came out of a boutique on King Street West, a sleek, white-fronted store selling things Tariq could have purchased without glancing at the price. She was wearing a camel coat, knee-high boots, large gold hoops, and the expression of someone who regarded public space as a personal inconvenience she had not consented to. Tariq was standing near the entrance, angling his body against the wind. You need to move, she said without stopping. He looked up. Pardon. She stopped then, looked at him the way you look at a stain that has appeared on something you own. I have clients coming. You are standing directly in front of the door. This is not a drop-in shelter. I am just trying to get out of the wind. There is a center on Adelaide Street. They can help you there. She held the door open for herself and let it close. Tariq moved. Over the next 10 days, Portia appeared with the regularity of a recurring bad weather system. On day 6, she walked past a cafe on Wellington where Tariq was looking through the window at the warmth inside and announced to her companion, loud enough for him to hear, this neighborhood used to have standards. On day 9, she nearly walked into him at a crossing on Bay Street, registered his coat, and crossed to the other side of the road to wait for the light. On day 11, the one that burned, he was crouched near Union Station helping an elderly Jamaican man whose cane had slipped on black ice. The man's papers had scattered across the pavement, and Tariq was gathering them when Portia walked past, saw him on the ground, and called out to a security guard nearby. Excuse me, that man is going through someone's belongings. The guard came, the elderly man explained. The guard apologized and left. Portia did not apologize. She straightened the strap of her bag and walked into the station without looking back. Tariq remained on the pavement for a moment. He filed her face away carefully. He would not forget it. On day 14, he found Adesuwa. He had wandered east, past the distillery district, into the kind of neighborhood that does not appear in tourism brochures but smells, on Saturday mornings, exactly like home. Someone had set up a row of market stalls in a community center parking lot near Gerrard Street, West African groceries, second-hand clothing, a woman selling plantain chips in small paper bags, a man with a folding table of kente fabric in deep golds and greens. At the end of the row, a woman stood behind two large pots on a propane burner and a hand-painted sign that read Adesuwa's Pepper Soup Egusi Jollof. Tariq smelled it before he saw it. Adesuwa Ikenna was 31 years old, and she had the quality of a person who has made a deliberate peace with difficulty. Not defeat, not resignation, but genuine peace. You can see it in how a person stands. She wore an Ankara head wrap in deep orange and green, a worn apron over her coat, and the expression of someone managing three things at once and enjoying all three. She ladled soup into containers, talked to a customer about the cold, and kept one eye on a small boy, her son Cheek, 7 years old, who was sitting on a plastic cooler nearby working through a page of arithmetic. She noticed Tariq at the edge of the stall. "You have been standing there," she said, not unkindly, "since before my last customer left. Your soup smells good." "It is good." She looked at him, really looked, the kind of looking that takes in more than clothes and surface. "Are you hungry?" "I do not have money." "I did not ask you about money." She waved him toward a folding chair beside the cooler. "Sit." He sat. She came back with a bowl of pepper soup, palm oil deep as afternoon sunlight, goat meat soft from long cooking, a warmth that spread from the throat outward in waves, and set it in front of him with a bottle of water and a small container of jollof on the side. "Eat," she said, "before it gets cold." "I cannot pay for this." "You already said that, and I already did not ask." She returned to her other customers. Tariq ate. He had eaten in restaurants where the bill would have covered a month of Adesuwa's market rent. He had eaten food prepared by private chefs in houses that overlooked Toronto Harbor. But sitting on a folding chair in a January parking lot, with Chike occasionally glancing up from his arithmetic to study him with large, serious eyes, that bowl of pepper soup tasted like something that could not be ordered from any menu he had ever seen. When he finished, Adesuwa came back and refilled his water. "Better?" she asked. "Much better, thank you. My grandmother used to say that a hungry person at your door is not bad luck. They are a question. What you do with that question is your answer." She collected the empty bowl. So I answered. "What is your name?" "Adesuwa, yours?" He paused one small beat. "Tari," he said, his family's name for him since childhood. Close enough. "Tari." She nodded as if testing how it sounded. "That is a good name." He came back every day after that. Not always for the food, though the food was the best he had eaten in years. He came back because of the way she talked, because she treated him with exactly the same warmth on day 15 as she had on day 1, as though it had never occurred to her that he deserved anything less. He learned her story in pieces, the way you learn the shape of something by walking around it slowly. She had come to Canada from Benin City on a student visa 5 years ago, completed an accounting diploma at George Brown, and spent the following year learning that her credentials placed her at the bottom of every hiring shortlist, regardless of her grades. So she did what she could do well and with her own hands. The market stall was not the dream she had carried across the Atlantic. She had imagined herself in a glass office building in a good suit, doing work that mattered in the way that work with numbers can matter. But the stall was hers, entirely hers. Chike's father had left before Chike was born. He went back home, Adesuwa said one afternoon matter-of-factly, the way you report what the weather did last Tuesday. He was not ready. I decided not to wait for him to become ready. So I became ready for both of us. She woke at 4:30 every morning to prep. She stood on her feet until 5 in the afternoon. She made enough to cover rent in Scarborough, Cheek's school supplies, and the stall fees. Most months just enough. Some months, she skipped her own dinner so that Cheek could have seconds without knowing she had. "Are you happy?" Tariq asked her one afternoon. She gave the question real time, not the polite half-second that people usually allow it, but a genuine considered pause. I have cheeky, she said. I have work I am good at. I have enough. She looked at him sideways. Do you know what enough actually feels like, Tari? He did not answer. Then came day 21. It was a Thursday in late January, the kind of Toronto cold that feels personal, as though the wind has a specific disagreement with you. The market had been slow since morning. By 2 o'clock, Adesuwa had sold enough to cover the stall fee and little else. One pot sat nearly empty. A single container of jollof remained on the table, the one she had set aside since noon. Slow day, Tariq said, pulling his jacket closed at the chest. Very slow. She smiled, but the skin around her eyes was tired. The cold keeps people at home. He looked at the container. Is that for a customer? No. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked it up and held it out to him. Take it. Adesuwa, that is your dinner. I ate this morning. That is not the same. Tari, her voice was quiet and certain. Look at me. He looked. You have not eaten today, I can see it. I know what it looks like because I have looked like that myself. She pressed the container into his hands. The jollof was still warm through the cardboard. My grandmother did not raise me to eat while someone beside me goes hungry. Take it, please. His hands were shaking, and not from the cold. She did not know. That was the fact he kept turning over. She did not know who he was, did not know he owned buildings in 3 cities, did not know that the $20 in his pocket was a prop in a performance he was running, and that in reality he could have purchased her entire stall and the building behind it without pausing his day. She just saw a hungry man, and she gave him the last thing she had. Tariq sat down on the cooler. Cheek had gone home with a neighbor, and he opened the container, and the smell of that jollof rose into the cold afternoon air, and something broke open in him. Not a crack, a full, complete collapse. 20 years of it, 20 years of contracts with invisible clauses, of smiles with agendas behind them, of never once being certain that any person in his orbit saw him as a human being rather than an opportunity. He covered his face with one hand and he wept, not quietly, not with the kind of composed dignity a man in his position had trained himself to maintain. He cried the way you cry when you have been carrying something for so long you have forgotten the feeling of your own hands without the weight. Adesuwa sat down on an upturned milk crate beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. Hey, she said softly. Hey, whatever it is, you are not alone. You hear me? You are not alone. 3 words, no agenda behind them, no calculation. He composed himself slowly. She handed him a paper napkin and waited without fidgeting, without reaching for her phone, without making him feel like something that needed to be managed. You do not have to tell me what is wrong, she said, but I want you to know you have a friend here, whatever happens. 3 days later, Tariq called Otto from a payphone near Broadview Station. I found her. A long pause. What are you going to do? Tell her the truth, but I need to watch her one more time first. Tariq, Otto said, she gave you her dinner. I know, I just need to be sure. I have been wrong before. I cannot be wrong again. So he watched. On day 23, he saw a teenage boy hover at the edge of the stall for nearly 15 minutes, before Adesuwa noticed him, waved him over, set a full plate in front of him, and sent him on his way without once making him feel like a charity case. On day 25, a hard rain came, and Adesuwa spent 20 minutes holding her canopy over an elderly woman waiting for her daughter, getting soaked through her own jacket without complaining. And on day 27, Portia walked past the market. She was on her phone, not watching her feet, and her heel caught the edge of a wooden pallet. She went down hard, bag spilling, phone sliding, one knee on the wet asphalt. Tariq did not move. He remembered the security guard. He remembered the papers scattered on black ice near Union Station. He remembered what she had said about the neighborhood. Adesuwa moved immediately. She came around the stall, helped Portia to her feet, gathered her things, held out the phone. Portia looked at Adesuwa's hand and then at her apron. She snatched the phone back. Do not touch my things. God's whole street is a disaster. Adesuwa stepped back. I was only trying to help. I don't need help from, Portia gestured vaguely at the stall and the sign and all of it, and then walked away on her one good heel. Adesuwa watched her go. Then she shook her head, slowly, once, and turned back to straightening the containers on the table. Some people carry so much pain inside them, she said, to no one in particular, that the only place it has to go is outward. It comes out as cruelty, but underneath it, it is just sadness. She lined up the lids. It is sad, really. Not one note of bitterness. Tariq stared at her. "How do you do that?" he said. "Do what?" "Stay like that, after what she just said to you." Being angry at her does not make her kinder. And I have a stall to run and a son to feed tonight, and I do not have time to carry her ugliness around with me. It is hers. She can keep it. That evening, after the stall was packed and Cheek was at the neighbors, Tariq told Adesuwa the truth. They sat on the back steps of the community center. The city moved around them. "Adesuwa, my name is not Tari." She looked at him. "My name is Tariq Annan. I am not homeless. I am not struggling. For the last 27 days, I have been disguised, by choice, because my mother told me to go into the world with nothing and find out who treats me with dignity anyway." He paused. "You gave me your last meal, when you thought I had nothing to offer you, when you believed there was no possible return on what you were giving." The silence stretched out long enough for a streetcar to pass on Gerard. Then Adesuwa said, "Is this a joke?" "No. You are telling me you are the billionaire, the anonymous donor, that Tariq Annan." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing, a full, real, deep laugh, the kind that has nothing performative in it whatsoever. "A whole billionaire," she said, "sitting on my plastic cooler, eating jollof out of a takeaway container in those boots." She pointed at his feet, "with the hole in the toe." He started laughing too. "It is the best jollof I have ever eaten," he said. "It should be, for what it cost you in dignity." She wiped her eyes, then she got quiet. "Tariq, I need you to understand something." "Tell me." "I did not feed you because I felt sorry for you. I did not give you my dinner because I imagined you might be someone important. I fed you because you were a person and you were hungry, and that is the only reason I have ever needed." She looked at him steadily. "If you had told me on day one that you were a billionaire, I would have charged you triple." He laughed again, the kind of laugh that means something has come loose that needed to come loose. "What happens now?" she said. He took a breath. "There is a dinner in 4 days, a charity event at the Fairmont. I am being recognized publicly for the housing donation. It is the first time. I would like you to come with me." Adesuwa looked down at her apron. "Tariq, I do not have something to wear to a thing like that. I would not know how to be in a room full of." "You do not have to be anyone other than who you are. Who you are is more than enough, I give you my word." She was quiet. "Cheik would need someone to stay with him." "I will arrange it. And if the food at this dinner is disappointing, you can leave, deal." The Gardner Ballroom held 400 people that night, senators and tech executives, athletes and city councilors. Portia was in the third row in a red dress desk, working the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who never missed a high-profile event. Adesuwa stood beside Tariq in a deep indigo gown, her natural hair pinned with a small gold comb. She had looked at herself in the hotel mirror and said quietly, "I look like somebody." And Tariq had said, "You always were somebody." Now the outside matches. She had punched his arm. He had said, "I learned from the best pepper soup vendor in Toronto." She had laughed. The MC stepped to the podium. Tariq walked on stage. The applause filled the room floor to ceiling. He let it settle, buttoned his jacket, and leaned toward the microphone. "Thank you," he said. "I am not going to give you a speech about housing policy tonight. I want to tell you a story instead." The room stilled. 27 days ago, I walked out of my building in old clothes with $20 in my pocket, and I asked this city a question. How do you treat a person when you think they have nothing? He paused. A woman in this room told me to leave the entrance of her boutique because I was lowering the image of the neighborhood. His voice was even, unhurried. She called security when I was helping an elderly man who had fallen on ice near Union Station. Murmurs, heads beginning to turn. In the third row, Portia had gone completely still. And then Tariq said, his voice changing, I met someone else, a woman who runs a market stall on Girard Street East, who fed me every day for 3 weeks without once asking what I could give her in return. Who, on the coldest and slowest day of January, gave me her last meal, her dinner, the food she had been keeping for herself, so that a stranger she believed had nothing would not go hungry. The room was absolutely still. That woman is here tonight, he extended his hand. Adesuwa Ikenna. The spotlight found her. She rose slowly, one hand pressed over her heart, tears running quietly down her face the way they do when a person has not expected to be seen. 400 people stood. The sound was enormous. Tariq walked off the stage and crossed the ballroom and took her hand. I told you, he said quietly. You only had to be yourself. She laughed through the tears. The food here is actually decent. Nothing, he said, will ever touch your pepper soup. In the third row, Portia sat alone while the applause filled the room around her. She understood, in the precise way of a public moment that cannot be undone, exactly what she had been and what she had done. The tears that came were not from the music or the sentiment. They were from something older and harder than that. 3 months later, she came to the market stall. She stood in line like everyone else, no camel coat, no knee-high boots, regular clothes and an expression that was working very hard to hold itself together. 1 pepper soup, please, she said to the counter, not quite meeting Adesuwa's eyes. Adesuwa ladled the soup. She added extra meat. She set a piece of plantain beside the cup without being asked. Portia looked up. Why are you? Because it is cold, Adesuwa said simply, and pepper soup is always better when it is full. Portia's eyes filled. I am sorry, she whispered, for what I said to you, and I am sorry for all of it. Adesuwa reached across the counter and held her hand for 1 moment. I forgave you before you knew you needed it, she said. Now go and sit, and come back when you want the jollof. It takes longer to make, but it is worth the wait. Portia sat down. And for the first time in longer than she could place, she tasted what it felt like to be on the right side of someone's kindness. Tariq and Adesuwa were married 7 months later. Not at the Fairmont, not at any of the venues Otto had carefully shortlisted. They pushed 3 market tables together in the parking lot on Girard Street, strung lights from the canopy, and invited 60 people. The Saturday regulars, the construction workers, and bus drivers who bought soup every week, the elderly Jamaican man from Union Station, Otto, and Tariq's mother, who had flown from Kumasi and who held Adesuwa's face in both hands when they met and said simply, God answers prayers in the shape of people. Chaiki was the ring bearer. He walked the full length of the makeshift aisle with tremendous seriousness, holding the small pillow with both hands, and when he reached the end, he turned to the 60 guests and announced, I practiced this 8 times. Everyone laughed. Adesuwa laughed hardest. Tariq said his vows looking at a woman who had given him everything she had when she believed he had nothing. Not out of calculation, not out of expectation, but because her grandmother had taught her that a hungry person is a question, and she had been raised to answer. You did not save me with money, he said. You saved me with pepper soup and a folding chair and 3 words. Sit, eat, stay. You reminded me that the most powerful thing one human being can do for another is simply to see them. I was invisible for 27 days, and you were the only person who looked. Adesuwa did not read hers from anything. Tariq, you came to my stall with nothing, or so I believed, but you brought something I had not had in a long time. Proof that I was right to keep being who I am. I will keep being that person. For you. For Cheek. For every stranger who stands at the edge of this stall looking like they have not eaten since yesterday. That is who I am. I will not change. The 60 people who had been invited made more noise than 400 ever could. And under a string of market lights on Girard Street East, surrounded by the smell of jollof rice and the sound of people who had chosen, against every pressure this world applies, to remain good, 2 people from across the ocean found in each other the thing they had each stopped believing in. Not success, not status, not the validation of a room full of people who know your name. Just the simple, unshakable knowledge of being seen. the richest person in any room is not the one with the largest number behind their name. It is the one who gives when they have nothing left to give and never once counts the cost. Remember that. If this story moved something in you, subscribe to Ancient African Folktales and ring that notification bell, because every story we carry has traveled a long way to reach you, and we are nowhere near done.